Hello, it's me, Lee again, and I'm here just to do a little bit of ReproRehab housekeeping with you to tell you kind of where things are, where they live, and what we're planning to do with this course. So where does everything live in the ReproRehab metaverse, you may wonder? All of our course lectures and materials will be put on YouTube as soon as we create them. We anticipate uploading new material weekly during the 8-week boot camp, or sooner if they're created sooner. They should be uploaded each week by or on Monday of that week so that you can see, you can asynchronously watch all of the materials that you need for that week. And then we'll also create playlists for the different weeks and for the different course series or themes that we'll be doing. So, the introduction, the first few weeks, we'll just be talking about reproducibility in research, fair data principles, data sharing, and also data access and things like that. And then for a few of the weeks, we'll have different tracks you could follow. So you could do beginner MATLAB, beginner R, intermediate MATLAB, intermediate R. We have a very beginner Python as well. And I will note that since this is going to live on YouTube somewhere, we are creating content right now for this learner cohort, so the 2022 to 2023 learner cohort. But we anticipate adding new materials each year and keeping the existing materials so that hopefully it will live on and be useful, and we'll be creating more and more useful things for different populations and groups. Also, our TAs will be doing mini boot camps or workshops of their own, and any of the content they create will also upload to this YouTube. So hopefully this will be a growing universe of materials. Any accompanying hands-on materials that go with the lectures, like lab notebooks or code to share, we'll be putting that on GitHub, and I will briefly go over the easiest possible way to use GitHub for this to get these materials in a minute. In addition, we have some more advanced course lectures and materials. We will link them on our ReproRehab website for you. But some of those live in other parts of YouTube and GitHub that aren't specifically ReproRehab. So we'll just link those for you. And then finally, we are creating what we call ReproRehab DB or ReproRehab database. It should be a searchable and rateable, importantly, database of all courses for like learning data science, as well as data sets related to rehabilitation research. So there will be a separate video just about ReproRehab DB, so you can kind of get familiar with that as well. And then finally, we just want to note that all these materials are available to anyone. So we, of course, have our first learner cohort this year, this fall. But if you're watching this, hopefully, later, a year later, or even right now, and you're not part of the learner cohort, but you're interested in all of this, please feel free to use it. As I mentioned in the intro video, if you want to do it with a friend or a lab mate, just grab a partner and start going. And I think the best part about that will be generating some sort of accountability to keep yourselves on track. And then how do we interact with it? So our community right now for the current cohort lives on Slack. So feel free to have conversations, start channels, and share memes. Also, just a side note is that since we don't have a budget for it, it is a free workspace. So at some point, these messages and files will not last forever. And if you can send files via email, or if you send them on Slack and then delete them, that would be great, just to clear up some space. Like I mentioned before, ReproRehab, you can interact by searching for courses and data sets, but you can also rate the courses that you try. So if you start one and you don't like it, or it's not what you were looking for, we would love for you to say, I was looking for a Python course in X, and this ended up being something not what I was expecting. And so that people can start to get an idea of what would be most useful for them. And if you have your own courses and or data sets that you want to share, please feel free to add them to ReproRehab DB. We really hope that this becomes a ongoing, evolving community resource. And then finally, feel free to use our teaching materials to teach others if you'd like, or if you create other materials or offshoots of this, please let us know, and we would love to share this with our network as well. Our overarching goal, of course, is just to bring data science more into the rehabilitation research field. So anything that we can do to support that, we are happy to do. Okay, now I'm going to tell you the most a brief introductory version of how to use GitHub, because that is, as I mentioned before, where we will be putting our course materials. So any sort of code that we want you to interact with, and in some cases, like small data sets and things like that. And I think for beginners who have never written a line of code before, the idea of using GitHub might be very overwhelming. And if you Google like beginner's guide to GitHub, it can be super overwhelming and intimidating. There's all sorts of terms like git, push, pull, fork, etc. So I'm going to just show you how you can use it for this course. And for the purposes of our course materials, you can just think of it honestly like Google Drive or Dropbox, but for code. And the main reason we're using GitHub for this purpose is because we want to get you comfortable and familiar with the GitHub interface, so that hopefully you'll be interested in learning a little bit more about it. So there's 3 basic steps. You make an account on GitHub. You go to the repository you want. So for instance, you could go to this one, which is Dr. Keith Lowe's repository, which I'd already pulled up. And so he created a bunch of our programming resources for our program specifically, and he is one of our educational leadership team members. And let's say here you have the scripts that he's created. This is data. These are his scripts. He's a very well organized repository. If you're new to GitHub, this is essentially what it looks like. This is the username, and this is his repository called ReproRehab. Keith, being a prolific GitHub user, has other repositories as well that you can look at. But if you want this repository, the very easiest thing to do is go to code and then download zip. And that way you can have this repository on your computer. You can open up the code, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so hopefully that was useful. And that is the very easiest way you can use GitHub. And that way you can tell people, I used GitHub. Okay, that said, there are obviously more legitimate ways of using GitHub for what it's intended for, which is for also version control, being able to program or code with other people, being able to keep track of changes in your own code, etc. There are many resources. These came from Joanna, who's one of the TAs this year. But there's a resource for the Brain Hack 2021 video. There's also a ReproNim video on how to do it. And then there's also a website for how to make your first contribution. So that's if you wanted to put something of your own up on GitHub. And then this is the YouTube video that was the top hit when I searched GitHub for beginners. So this will tell you a lot more about GitHub and what else it can be used for. But hopefully what I showed you is useful enough just to get started and get the code. And then finally, please do check out our code of conduct. We will be putting it on our website, and it'll be linked in the description below. These are the general principles. They are basically, please be nice. This is a great community and we want it to stay great. Please have fun, learn together, be respectful of other people, be considerate of their participation, be aware of any biases that you may have. And then if you have any issues, please reach out to the leadership team as soon as possible so that we can help you to resolve them. And many, many thanks to the ABCD ReproNim program and their predecessors for creating and widely sharing this code of conduct so that we could adapt it for our program too. Okay, so I think that's about it. I hope you guys have a great time, and feel free to put any questions in the comments. All right, thanks.